Welcome to the Jaren Jarvis channel. I am Jaren Jarvis. Today, I would like to introduce to you, I run a bed and breakfast. Sort of, part 3. Part 2. Hey everyone. Things have been pretty calm around here. Which is great because I'm trying to get you caught up before I drop you into the middle of all of this. This shouldn't take too long. It hasn't been that long since we opened. It just feels like I'm losing years of my life. Oh, and someone asked where the creeping darkness gets its money. The answer to that is, I have no idea. We don't really talk. But I promise that the next time the light bulb blows out, I will ask. If the answer is illegal, I will lie to each and every one of you. I'm pretty sure that that cop told everyone in town not to come here and I have bills to pay and a basement thing to feed. Some of you have expressed a fondness for the blind man. I'm willing to admit that he isn't the worst thing in the world. Barely. You don't have to live with him. Entry 2. So the other night, I mentioned the house rules. Figured I'd explain a bit more about those. Rule 1, no one is allowed to put anything in the fridge but me. I don't care if whatever was in that bucket could be considered edible to the blind man, I don't want it next to my food. I explained this politely over dinner. Very politely, and got a grand total of nothing in response. Great, right? I mean, after all, silence is kinda his default right. No. Not great. That night, warm and secure in my bed, I awoke suddenly and in unbelievable terror. Something moved against my ankle. Something warm and wrong. Tapping on and off of my skin in rhythmic bursts. Marshalling up my courage, I forced my eyes down to look at the end of the bed. He stood there like a statue, pale eyes fixed dead ahead on the wall above me. His hand was on my ankle, fingers curling and uncurling over and over again. From the very beginning, I'd known there was something wrong with his hands. Something smothered up by the dirt and blood. Now I felt it. His knuckles bent in the wrong directions, each bony knob striking me at a sickening angle. There were too many of them as well. I know his hands aren't overly long. Instead, it was as if each and every segment of his fingers had been snapped in half, never fusing back together. His nails caught on my skin, but there was no purpose to it. Just the byproduct of the constant movement. I didn't move. Didn't budge. Hoping desperately that he would think I was asleep and leave me alone. Bits of what I could only assume were blood fell onto my leg, dry and flaky. It made me itch. It went on for 4 hours and 23 minutes. I know because the alarm clock next to my bed was my only company as I watched him and felt him all night long. In the morning, the bucket was gone. I think I won that battle. Rule 2, if it pays it stays. This one you already knew. Rule 3, if you're going to dig suspiciously body-sized holes in the backyard, please put something on top of them. The responses to this rule were mixed. For reasons I can't even begin to understand, the blind man chose lawn gnomes. There weren't any in the basement before he got there. I'm not sure where he's getting them, but I think they may be a hobby of his. I've never seen them in the same position twice. I started putting flower seeds around them to make them seem less shady. The creeping darkness has apparently settled on mirrors/shiny things. I'm not sure how the creeping darkness even found out about the rules. It's not like we talk. But since all of the clutter is polished to show room levels of shiny and specifically positioned to reflect light up to room 3's window, I'm pretty sure it's them. It. Him. Whatever. Rule 4, if you have a problem with a tenant, you can go up or down and tell it to them yourself. This hasn't come up yet, but I'm sure it will at some point. I want to establish this rule right now. If you think I'm going into the basement, you are out of your mind. Rule 5, if the trees offer you a gift, you always take it. The forest is good. The forest is kind. I'm very grateful. Maybe if I say it enough I can make the forest believe me. It started with small things. A flower place on a stump when I turned around. A wood toy deer so smooth it couldn't have been natural. A pile of acorns which I planted at the edge of the yard. One day I turned around, basket of raspberry against my hip, and found a hunk of bread on the fallen tree in front of me. After all the other nonsense and the ever-present narration, at this point an uncomfortable white noise in my ears. I knew immediately that it was a gift. I looked briefly at its mushy wet surface, noticing ants peeking around the edges. The forest had likely found it in some campus cast-offs. No telling how long it had sat on the forest floor. I just wasn't going to eat it. I'm sorry, I just couldn't do it. I just left it there and started back down the trail towards the house. She left it. She left it. She left it. The forest's whispers echoed around me like a curse. Its tone varied from confusion to halting, shaking rage. They were just being dramatic, I thought. It was just a bit of bread. He watched her through the trees, silent as the grave. Claws cutting through moss and stone alike, leaving gaping pits in the earth. Everything went dark around me like night had come at noon. I looked above me, watching as the tree branches wove together, an impenetrable canopy blocking out all light. Everything went silent. No birds sang. No animals moved. There was nothing but the growing anger of the forest itself. It watched the witch shiver in fear. Saw her squinting into the darkness. Something cracked behind me. I jumped, throwing myself forward. A big burst of air hit me in the back. I stumbled, trying desperately to keep my feet. Behind me something snarled, huffing giant breaths like the cross between a jungle cat and a full-grown moose. Without pause I started sprinting. Not to the house but back the way I had come. The ground shook underneath me, rolling with each of its massive steps. Branches and roots shot down and up around me, tugging at my clothes and trying to wrap around my arms and legs. Trying to hold me still so it could have me. Thorny bushes sprouted out of nowhere, tearing into my legs. Blood dripped down them in rivulets. But it kept coming unhindered. My breath felt like fire. I broke into the clearing, making a mad dash across the open space. Before I made it 2 steps, a massive weight threw me to the ground, pinning me in the dirt, dragging and turning me until I was face to face with a monster. It was a melted mass of animal parts fit together in a gruesome mishmash. Like 6 puzzles forced to fit together. Its left eye was unmistakably human, along with half of the teeth scattered throughout its giant maw. It towered over me, as big as Bus. In 2 great snaps the beast broke her in half, devouring all but her ungrateful heart. The forest cried. My hands scrambled through the dirt, searching desperately for something. Anything. My fingers landed on a sharp rock. I grabbed it. I yanked it out of the moss, and with all of my strength, I jammed it right into its stupid human eye. It reared back just enough for me to slide out from under it. I crawled as fast as I could over to the fallen tree, and without a second of hesitation I shoved the bread into my mouth. The surface of it gave under my fingers, and something inside squirmed between my teeth as I bit down. I forced it down my throat, not letting the rank taste stop me or the slab of fuzz. I took gasping breaths when I was through. Mind buzzing with panic. Thank you. That was wonderful. I don't know how I could have forgotten to pick it up the first time, I shouted. Thank you so much for correcting me. I hugged that trunk like my life depended on it. Everything was still. I would have held my breath if I weren't so dizzy with exhaustion. Above me light appeared. She pays tribute to the forest. Loving it dearly. Her forgetfulness no longer clouding her heart, the forest cooed. Sighing in relief, I turned and found the monster gone. Wrecked earth, all that was left behind. I made my way back home slowly. My legs aching and still bleeding. I hugged more than a half-dozen trees along the trail. Just for safety. At home, I put together some fish and chips which I left on the table for the blind man to eat on his own. I threw up. Then went to bed. If the trees give you a gift, always take it. If the trees offer you a moose corpse with a sombrero glued to its head, you drag that bitch all the way home, talking loudly about how awesome it is. The whole time. It's more than a rule. Hug a tree today. Your life might depend on it. Part 2.